Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the command center of the Mars Defense Station, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. The red planet turned slowly below them, its dusty surface dotted with human cities and mining operations. It was a peaceful morning until the alarm started screaming. "Admiral, we have incoming signals from the deep space sensors," called Captain Lisa Hayes from her station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. Lisa had been his intelligence officer for 8 years, and she never got excited about small things. Jake walked over to her console. The screen showed dozens of red dots moving toward their solar system. The ships were big, much bigger than anything humans had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, like they had done this many times before. "How many ships are we looking at?" Jake asked. Lisa checked her readings twice before answering. "Over 3,000 vessels, sir. The largest ones are 20 times bigger than our biggest battleships. They'll reach the edge of our system in 6 hours. Jake felt his stomach drop. A human fleet had less than 200 ships total, scattered across all the colonies. Most of them were cargo haulers and mining ships with some weapons bolted on. They had never faced anything like this. "Have we heard from them yet?" Jake asked. "No, sir, but they're broadcasting on all frequencies. It's not directed at us specifically. They're just sending the same message over and over." Jake nodded. "Put it on the main screen." The viewing window changed to show a tall, thin creature with gray skin and forearms. Its eyes were completely black, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. "I am War Commander Vexmal of the Kethfer Empire. Your species has been selected for integration into the Empire. You will surrender all military forces immediately. You will prepare your population for relocation and work assignments. You have 72 of your planet's cycles to comply. Failure to surrender will result in the complete removal of your species from this galaxy." This message will not be repeated. The screen went dark. The command center was completely silent for a long moment. "Well," Jake said finally, "that's not very friendly." Lisa pulled up everything they knew about the Kethfer Empire. It wasn't much. A few refugee ships had reached human space over the years, carrying survivors from dead worlds. They all told the same story. The Kethfer showed up, demanded surrender, and either enslaved the species or killed them all. No one had ever successfully fought them off. "Sir, I'm getting calls from Earth Command, Luna Base, and all the colony." "Governors," reported Lieutenant Ben Cooper from the communications station. "Everyone wants to know what's happening." Jake took a deep breath. "Set up a conference call with President Rodriguez and the Defense Council. We need to figure out what we're going to do." 20 minutes later, Jake was looking at screens showing faces from all over human space. President Maria Rodriguez sat in her office in Washington, D.C. on Earth. General Rick Barnes was calling from Luna Base. Governor Amy Parker was connected from the Jupiter colonies. Dozens of other military and civilian leaders filled the smaller screens. "Ladies and gentlemen," President Rodriguez began, "we all heard the alien message. I want to hear recommendations from our military leaders first." General Barnes spoke up immediately. "Madam President, we need to consider surrender. We have less than 200 combat-capable ships. They have over 3,000. Our weapons are primitive compared to what the refugees described. If we fight, we lose. If we lose, everyone dies." Governor Parker shook her head. "Rick, you're talking about slavery. The refugees told us what happens to species that surrender. They get worked to death in mines and factories. Their children get taken away and raised as soldiers for the Empire. That's not living. That's just dying slowly." "At least some of us would survive," Barnes argued. "If we fight, they'll kill every human in the galaxy." Jake had been listening to the argument for 10 minutes. Finally, he spoke up. With respect, General Barnes, I think you're wrong about our chances. Everyone turned to look at him. President Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Explain, Admiral. Jake stood up and activated the tactical display. The Kethver are used to fighting species that give up easily. Look at their formation. They're not even trying to hide. They're flying in straight lines like they're in a parade. They expect us to surrender without a fight. He changed the display to show human ship positions. Our ships are smaller and faster. We know our own solar system better than they do. We can use the asteroid belts, the gas giant moons, even the planets themselves as weapons. You're talking about guerrilla warfare in space, said Captain Hayes. It's never been tried on this scale. That's exactly why it might work, Jake replied. They've conquered hundreds of worlds, but they've never fought anyone who refused to play by their rules. Dr. Karen Walsh, the head of xenobiology research, joined the conversation. The refugee accounts all mention the same thing. The Kethver don't understand species that keep fighting after they've lost. Their whole empire is built on the idea that everyone eventually gives up. President Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. Admiral Morrison, what are you proposing exactly? Jake looked directly at the camera. I'm proposing we tell them no. We fight with everything we have. We make them pay for every inch of space they take. Even if we lose, we show the galaxy that humans don't kneel. The debate went on for 2 hours. Some leaders wanted to negotiate. Others wanted to surrender immediately to save lives. But slowly, more and more voices joined Jake's side. The idea of fighting impossible odds seemed to appeal to something deep in human nature. Finally, President Rodriguez called for a vote. It was close, but the decision was made. Humanity would refuse the ultimatum. President Rodriguez looked tired but determined. Admiral Morrison, you'll coordinate our military response. I'll prepare a message for the Kethver. 6 hours later, the alien fleet had reached the edge of the solar system. They were waiting for humanity's answer. President Rodriguez sat in the White House broadcast room, with cameras from every human world watching. War Commander Dexmo, of the Kethver Empire, she began, you have demanded our surrender. You have threatened to destroy us if we refuse. I am here to give you humanity's answer. She paused and looked directly into the camera. We refuse. We will not surrender our freedom. We will not allow our children to become slaves. We will not kneel to your empire or any other. She stood up from her chair. You came here expecting easy prey. Instead, you have found humans. We may not have your numbers or your technology, but we have something you don't understand. We have the will to fight for our freedom, no matter the cost. The broadcast went out on all frequencies, reaching every human settlement and every alien ship in the system. The Kethver Empire wanted our obedience, President Rodriguez concluded. Instead, they will receive our defiance. Earth does not kneel. Aboard his flagship, War Commander Dexmo watched the human transmission with confusion. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever refused the Empire's mercy. These humans seemed to actually believe they could fight his massive fleet. He turned to his communications officer. Send a message to all ships. Begin the attack. Show these humans what happens to species that defy the Empire. But as his ships moved deeper into the solar system, Dexmo felt something he had never experienced before. For the first time in his long career, he was fighting an enemy that refused to be afraid. The war for humanity's survival was about to begin. War Commander Dexmo stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the human solar system spread out before him. His fleet moved in perfect formation toward the inner planets. 3,000 ships of war, each one carrying enough firepower to level a continent. He had seen this pattern hundreds of times before. A primitive species would see his fleet, realize they had no chance, and surrender within hours. The few who tried to fight usually lasted less than a day before their leaders begged for mercy. But these humans were different. Their message had been broadcast 6 hours ago, and they were still refusing to surrender. Dexmol found it puzzling, but not concerning. Defiance without power was just noise. War Commander, his tactical officer reported, were detecting human ship movements near the gas giant they called Jupiter, approximately 40 vessels. Dexmol looked at the display showing tiny dots moving around Jupiter's moons. The human ships were so small compared to his fleet that they barely registered on the sensors. Only 40 ships? He asked, where are the rest of their forces? Scattered throughout the system, sir. Small groups hiding behind asteroids and moons. They seemed to be avoiding direct confrontation. Dexmol nodded. This was more like what he expected. The humans were finally showing some sense. They knew. They couldn't win a direct battle, so they were hiding. Soon they would realize hiding was useless too. Colonel Amy Parker stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, her flagship positioned behind Ganymede, one of Jupiter's largest moons. Around her, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Everyone knew they were about to die, but no one was talking about it. Status report, Amy said. Lieutenant Tony Miller looked up from his console. All ships are in position, Colonel. The mining charges are ready. Ben Cooper's fighter squadron is standing by. Amy nodded. The plan was insane, but it was the only chance they had. The human fleet couldn't match the aliens in a straight fight, so they weren't going to fight straight. Colonel, the communications officer called out, we're getting a transmission from Admiral Morrison. Amy's screen lit up with Jake Morrison's face. Behind him, she could see the busy command center of the Mars Defense Station. Amy, are you ready? Jake asked. As ready as we'll ever be, she replied. The Kethver fleet is 3 hours out from Jupiter. When they get here, we'll give them a surprise they won't forget. Jake smiled grimly. Remember, the goal isn't to win this battle. The goal is to make them pay for it. Show them that humans don't die quietly. The transmission ended. Amy turned to address her crew. You all know the plan. We're not trying to be heroes today. We're trying to be human. That means we fight smart, we fight dirty, and we never give up. Lieutenant Ben Cooper sat in the cockpit of his fighter, docked inside the carrier UES Liberty. Around him, 24 other pilots were running final checks on their ships. They were about to attempt something that had never been tried before. In space combat. Attention all fighters, pinned the voice of Captain Susan Blake over the comm system. The alien fleet will be in range in 30 minutes. Remember, speed and surprise are our only advantages. Hit them fast, hit them hard, and get out before they can target you. Ben checked his weapons one more time. His fighter carried 8 nuclear missiles, each one powerful enough to crack a small moon. In a normal space battle, fighters were used. FOI reconnaissance and harassment. Today, they were going to be the main attack force. Ben, you ready for this? Asked his wingman, Lieutenant Alan Foster. No, Ben replied honestly. But we're doing it anyway. The Kethver fleet reached Jupiter. Exactly on schedule. War Commander Dexmol expected to find the human ships cowering behind the planet's moons. Instead, his sensors showed something impossible. War Commander, his tactical officer reported, voice filled with confusion. The humans are launching some kind of projectiles from the surface of the large moon. Dexmol looked at the display. Dozens of objects were flying up from Ganymede's surface, moving at incredible speed. They were too small to be ships, too fast to be missiles. What are they? He demanded Dot before anyone could answer. The first chunk of rock and metal hit his fleet. The humans had turned Ganymede's mining operation into a massive railgun. launching tons of raw ore at a significant fraction of light speed. The improvised projectiles punched through alien ship hulls like they were made of paper. Damage report. Dexmol shouted as alarms began sounding throughout his ship. We've lost 18 ships, War Commander. The projectiles are too fast for our defensive systems to intercept. Dexmol stared at the tactical display in disbelief. These primitive humans had just destroyed 18 of his ships using mining, equipment, and chunks of rock. It was impossible, but it was happening. All ships, evasive maneuvers, he ordered. Get us out of range of their weapons. But the humans weren't done. As the Kethver fleet tried to move away from Ganymede, the human fighters came screaming out from behind Jupiter's other moons. Ben Cooper led the first wave of fighters straight into the alien formation. The Kethver had weapons that could destroy. A fighter with one shot, but they were designed to target large, slow-moving ships. The tiny human fighters were too small and too fast for the alien targeting systems to lock on to effectively. This is Lightning Leader, Ben called over the comm. Beginning attack run on the command ship. His fighter dove toward the massive Kethver flagship, weaving between the alien weapon beams. Behind him, the other fighters spread out to attack different targets. Each fighter carried enough nuclear firepower to cripple a ship many times its size. Ben lined up his shot on the Eternal Dominion's main weapon array and fired all 8 of his missiles at once. The nuclear warheads exploded against the alien ship's shields in a series of brilliant flashes. The shields held, but Ben could see the energy readings fluctuating. All fighters, concentrate fire on the command ship, he ordered. Hit it with everything you have. 60 fighters swarmed the flagship, each one launching every missile they carried. The Eternal Dominion's shields flickered and failed under the concentrated nuclear assault. The ship's hull cracked open in dozens of places as secondary explosions tore through its interior. War Commander Dexmol felt his ship shaking apart around him. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the bridge as damage reports flooded in from every section. War Commander, we need to evacuate the bridge. His aide shouted over the noise of collapsing bulkheads, but Dexmol was staring at his tactical display in shock. His perfect fleet was being torn apart by insects. Hundreds of tiny human fighters were swarming through his formation, too small for his weapons to hit reliably, but each one carrying enough firepower to damage his largest ships. How many ships have we lost? He demanded. 200 and counting, sir. The humans are using nuclear weapons like conventional explosives. They're not following any known rules of space combat. The battle raged for 6 hours. The human fighters attacked in waves, using hit-and-run tactics that the Kethvar had never encountered. When their missiles were gone, they rammed their ships into alien vessels, turning themselves into guided bombs. Colonel Amy Parker watched from the Defiance as her fleet fought the largest space battle in human history. The humans were losing ships too, but they were taking far more aliens with them than should have been possible. Colonel, Lieutenant Miller reported, we've lost half our fighters, but the alien fleet is in chaos. They're pulling back toward the outer system. Amy nodded. The plan was working better than anyone had dared hope. The humans couldn't win this battle, but they were making the aliens pay a price they had never expected to pay. All remaining ships begin withdrawal to Mars. She ordered. We've done what we came here to do. As the surviving human ships retreated deeper into the solar system, War Commander Dexmol surveyed the damage to his fleet. Over 200 ships destroyed, 50,000 crew members dead, and his flagship barely operational in 3 centuries. Of conquest, he had never lost more than a handful of ships to any enemy. These humans had just dealt him the worst military defeat in Kethver history. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving messages from the homeworld. The High Command wants a status report. Dexmol looked out at the wreckage. of human and alien ships drifting in Jupiter's orbit. What was he supposed to tell them? That a primitive species with inferior technology had just humiliated the Empire's finest fleet? Tell them, he said slowly, that these humans are not like the others. They fight like nothing we have ever encountered. As his damaged fleet limped toward the inner solar system, Dexmol realized that this war was going to be different from all the others. For the first time in his long career, he was fighting an enemy that would rather die than surrender. The humans had lost the battle, but they had won something more important. They had shown the galaxy and themselves that the Kethver Empire could bleed. Dr. Corinne Walsh crouched in the ruins of what used to be Chicago, watching Kethver patrol ships fly overhead. The alien occupation had been in place for 3 months now, and the invaders were learning that controlling Earth was much harder than conquering it. The Kethver had won the space battle, just as everyone expected. After the fighting at Jupiter, the remaining human fleet had made a final stand at Mars. They had fought bravely and died even more bravely, but in the end, superior numbers and technology had won out. Admiral Morrison's last transmission had been simple: keep fighting, never surrender. Now Karen was part of the underground resistance that had grown up in every human city under alien control. The Kethver had expected the humans to accept a feat once their government surrendered. Instead, they found themselves fighting a war against every human on every occupied world. "Dr. Walsh," whispered Tom Rogers, one of her resistance fighters. "The supply convoy is coming down Michigan Avenue in 10 minutes. Karen nodded and checked her improvised explosive device one more time. Before the war, she had been a xenobiologist studying alien life forms. Now she was learning how to kill alien life forms as efficiently as possible. The Resistance had discovered something important about the Kethvar. Despite their advanced technology, they were not very creative thinkers. They expected warfare to follow predictable patterns. They could handle organized military resistance, but guerrilla warfare from civilians confused and frustrated them. "Remember," Karen told her team, "hit the convoy hard and fast, then disappear into the ruins. Don't try to fight their security forces directly. We want to make them afraid, not give them easy targets." The Kethver supply convoy came down the street exactly on schedule. 6 hover trucks filled with supplies for the alien occupation force, escorted by 2 patrol vehicles. The aliens had gotten overconfident after months of successful operations. Karen pressed the detonator. The first truck disappeared in a ball of fire as her bomb exploded directly underneath it. The other fighters opened fire from the ruins on both sides of the street, using captured alien weapons and human-made explosives. The attack lasted less than 3 minutes. When it was over, 4 trucks were destroyed, and a dozen Kethvar soldiers were dead. The resistance fighters melted away into the ruined city before reinforcements could arrive. Similar attacks were happening all over the occupied worlds. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy they could not see, could not predict, and could not defeat through conventional means. On the Kethver command ship in orbit above Earth, War Commander Dexmol read the daily casualty reports with growing frustration. His forces were losing more soldiers to human resistance than they had lost in the original space battles. "Commander," his aide reported, "the humans have destroyed another supply depot on the world they call New Angeles. That's the 15th successful attack this week." Dexmol studied the tactical displays showing human resistance activity across dozens of worlds. Red dots marked recent attacks, and there seemed to be more of them every day. "What about the punishment raids?" he asked. "Have they not discouraged further resistance?" His aide looked uncomfortable. "Sir, the punishment raids seem to be making a problem worse. Every time we destroy a human settlement in retaliation, more humans join the resistance." This made no sense to the Exmo. In every other conquest, public executions and the destruction of cities had quickly broken the spirits of conquered species. The survivors would beg for mercy and accept whatever terms the Empire offered, but humans seemed to have the opposite reaction. The more brutally the Kethver treated them, the more fiercely they fought back. It was as if pain and loss made them stronger instead of weaker. General Rick Barnes crept through the tunnels beneath Luna City, leading a team of soldiers toward the alien command bunker. The Kethver had taken over the former human military base and turned it into their regional headquarters. Rick had been in charge of Luna Base before the invasion. Now he was leading a guerrilla army that lived in the maintenance tunnels and emergency shelters beneath the lunar cities. The low gravity made the tunnels perfect for hit-and-run attacks. "General," whispered Sergeant Lisa Cole, "we've got visual on the target. 12 Kethver guards, plus whatever's inside the bunker." Rick looked through his scope at the alien installation. The Kethver had good sensors, but they were designed to detect ships and large vehicles. A small team of humans moving quietly through tunnels could get surprisingly close before being detected. "Remember the plan," Rick told his team. "We're not trying to hold the position. We get in, plant the charges, and get out. The goal is to disrupt their communications and show them that nowhere is safe." The attack began at midnight lunar time. Rick's soldiers had trained for months in the earth tunnel systems, learning to move silently in the low gravity. They emerged from concealed entrances all around the Kethvar bunker. Attacking from 6 directions at once, the aliens were caught completely off guard. Their defensive positions were designed to repel attacks from outside the base, not from teams that appeared suddenly from underground tunnels. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it was over, the Kethver command bunker was a smoking ruin, and Rick's team had disappeared back into the tunnels like ghosts. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, Dr. Alan Foster worked in a hidden research facility that the Kethver didn't know existed. The base had been built inside a natural cave system beneath the moon's ice shell, invisible to orbital sensors. Alan and his team were studying captured Kethver technology, trying to understand how the alien ships and weapons worked. It was slow, dangerous work. Several researchers had been killed when alien devices exploded or released poisonous gases, but they were making progress. The Kethver technology was advanced, but it followed logical principles that human scientists could understand. More importantly, they were starting to find weaknesses. Dr. Foster called out Lieutenant Sam Parker, one of the military engineers working with the research team. "I think I've found something important." Alan walked over to Sam's workstation, where pieces of a Kethver shield generator were spread out on the table. "Look at this," Sam said, pointing to a crystalline component in the center of the device. "This crystal is what generates the energy field that protects their ships. But it has a resonance frequency. If we could generate a signal at exactly the right frequency, we could make their shields fail." Alan studied the crystal carefully. "Are you sure about this?" "I've run the tests a dozen times," Sam replied. "The crystal always fails when exposed to a specific electromagnetic frequency. The problem is generating enough power to affect a ship-sized shield generator." Alan smiled for the first time in months. "Sam, I think you just found us a way to fight back." President Maria Rodriguez sat in a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, coordinating resistance activities across all the human worlds. The Kethvar thought they had captured or killed all the human leaders, but the resistance had learned to operate without centralized command. "Madam President," reported Captain Tony Miller, one of the few surviving officers from the original fleet, "we're getting reports from all the occupied worlds. The aliens are having trouble maintaining control anywhere." Maria looked at the intelligence reports coming in from resistance cells around the galaxy. The pattern was clear. Humans simply would not accept occupation no matter how hopeless their situation seemed. "What about casualties?" she asked. Tony's expression grew grim. "We're losing people every day. The aliens are getting more brutal in their reprisals. But for every human they kill, 10 more join the resistance." Maria nodded. This was the horrible mathematics of guerrilla warfare. The resistance could only win by being willing to pay a higher price than their enemies were willing to make them pay. "Any word from Dr. Foster's team on Europa?" "Yes, ma'am. They think they found a weakness in the alien shield technology. If they're right, we might be able to build weapons that can actually hurt their ships." Maria felt a spark of hope for the first time since the invasion began. "How long before they can test it?" "Unknown, Mom. They need more equipment and materials, but they're confident it will work." On his flagship above Earth, War Commander, Dexmal received a communication from the Kethvar High Command. The message was brief and direct. The Empire was growing impatient with the slow progress of the human conquest. Not other worlds had been fully integrated into the Empire within months of surrender. The humans had been under occupation for almost a year, and they were still fighting. Worse, reports of human resistance were spreading to other conquered species, inspiring rebellions on worlds that had been peaceful for decades. "War Commander," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting unusual energy readings from the moon of the gas giant. It could be a human base." Dexmal studied the sensor data. The readings were faint, hidden beneath layers of ice and rock, but they were definitely artificial. "Prepare a strike force," he ordered. "If the humans have a hidden base, we will destroy it and everyone inside." But as his ships moved toward Europa, Dexmal wondered if destroying one base would make any difference. The humans seemed to have an endless supply of fighters willing to die for their cause. For the first time in his long career, he was beginning to wonder if the Empire had made a mistake in it. Commander Susan Blake stood on the bridge of the UE's Retribution, watching Mars grow larger on the main screen. The ship was unlike anything humans had built before, combining captured Kethvar technology with human engineering in ways that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. 2 years had passed since the Kethvar invasion began. 2 years of occupation, resistance, and slowly learning how to fight back. The hidden research facility on Europa had been discovered and destroyed, but not before Dr. Foster's team had transmitted their breakthrough to resistance cells across the galaxy. Now humanity was ready to take back what was theirs. "Status report," Susan ordered. Lieutenant Ben Cooper, now serving as her tactical officer, looked up from his console. "All systems green, Commander. The shield resonance weapon is fully charged. The hybrid engines are running at optimal efficiency." Susan nodded. The Retribution was one of 12 new ships built in secret shipyards hidden in the asteroid belt. They were smaller than the original human fleet, but they packed weapons that could punch through Kethvar shields like they were made of tissue paper. "Communications? Any word from the other strike teams?" "Yes, ma'am," replied Ensign Carol Davis. "The Luna team reports ready. The Earth team is in position. Admiral Morrison's group is standing by at the Jupiter defense platforms." Susan smiled. At the mention of Jake Morrison, the old admiral had been presumed dead after the fall of Mars, but he had been building a new fleet the whole time, using captured alien technology and pure human stubbornness. "All teams, this is Retribution," Susan broadcast. "Operation Homecoming begins in 10 minutes. Remember, we're not just taking back Mars. We're showing the galaxy that humans can win." War Commander Dexmal sat in his command center on the surface of Mars, reviewing casualty reports from across the human worlds. 2 years of occupation had cost his forces more soldiers than the previous 10 conquests combined. The humans simply would not stop fighting. Every city was a battlefield, every civilian a potential enemy. His forces were spread thin across dozens of worlds, trying to maintain control over a species that seemed psychologically incapable of accepting defeat. War Commander, his aide reported, were detecting unusual energy signatures approaching from the asteroid belt. Multiple contacts, moving fast. Dexmol looked at the tactical display with interest. The humans had tried several times to retake Mars, but their attacks had been poorly coordinated and easily defeated. This looked different. How many ships? He asked. 12 confirmed, sir. But they're not like the previous human vessels. The energy signatures are strange. Before Dexmol could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the base. The first wave of human ships had just dropped out of hyperspace directly above Mars. Susan Blake felt the familiar weight of acceleration as the Retribution dove toward the Kethfer fleet in orbit around Mars. The alien ships were moving to intercept, but they were too slow. The hybrid human-alien engines gave the new ships a significant speed advantage. Target the command carrier, Susan ordered. All weapons full power. The Retribution's main gun fired, sending a focused beam of energy directly at the largest Kethfer ship. The beam was tuned to the exact frequency that would disrupt the alien shield crystals. The massive carrier's shields flickered and died just as the beam struck its hull. The explosion was spectacular. The carrier, which had survived hundreds of battles across the galaxy, cracked open like an egg and began spinning out of control toward Mars' surface. Direct hit, Ben reported. Their shields are down across the entire fleet. They don't know what's happening. Similar scenes were playing out across the solar system. The human ships were using their new weapons to devastating effect, targeting the Kethfer's previously impenetrable defenses with surgical precision. On Luna, General Rick Barnes led a ground assault against the main alien command base. His forces had been preparing for this moment for 2 years, studying alien tactics and weaknesses. All units advance, Rick ordered as his soldiers poured out of the tunnel systems they had been using for guerrilla operations. The Kethfer defenders found themselves facing an enemy they didn't recognize. These weren't the desperate, poorly equipped rebels they had been fighting. These were professional soldiers using coordinated tactics and weapons specifically designed to counter alien technology. The battle for Luna Base lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Kethfer flag was replaced by the banner of the United Earth Forces. Dr. Corinne Walsh watched from the ruins of Chicago as human ships filled the sky above Earth. The Resistance had been coordinating with the returning fleet, preparing for simultaneous uprisings in every major city. This is it, she told her fighters. 2 years of hiding, 2 years of hit-and-run attacks, and now we take our world back. The signal came at exactly noon Eastern Time. In every human city on Earth, Resistance fighters emerged from their hiding places and began attacking Kethfor installations. The aliens found themselves fighting on 1,000 fronts at once, with no way to coordinate their response. But the most important battle was happening in space. Above Mars, War Commander Dexmol had regrouped his remaining ships for a final stand, but he was fighting an enemy he no longer understood. War Commander, his tactical officer reported, we've lost 60% of our fleet. The human weapons are cutting through our shields like they don't exist. Dexmol watched his ships die one by one on the tactical display. These new human vessels were smaller than his remaining ships, but they were faster, more maneuverable, and their weapons were specifically designed to exploit weaknesses in Kethfer technology. How is this possible? He demanded. 2 years ago, these humans were using primitive chemical rockets. Now they're out fighting the Empire's finest fleet. His aide looked up from a communications console. Sir, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Human resistance cells are broadcasting some kind of technical data to other species. The rebels on Zarian Prime just destroyed an entire garrison, using weapons similar to what we're seeing. Here, Dexmal felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of conquest: fear. Not fear of death, but fear of failure. Fear that his perfect empire was beginning to crumble. "Send a message to the High Command," he ordered. "Tell them the human situation is out of control. We need reinforcements immediately." But even as he gave the order, Dexmal knew it might be too late. The humans weren't just fighting for their own freedom anymore. They were teaching other species how to fight for theirs. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UES Defiance II, watching the final phase of the battle for Mars. The Kethver fleet was in full retreat, their formation broken and their morale shattered. "Admiral," reported Captain Amy Parker, who had survived the original battle at Jupiter and now commanded her own ship, "the alien fleet is withdrawing to the outer system. Mars is secure." Jake nodded, but Admiral Jake Morrison, stood before the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. 200 ships filled the space around Earth, but these were not the desperate defenders of 3 years ago. These were warships built with hybrid human Kethfor technology, crewed by veterans who had learned to fight the galaxy's most powerful empire and win. "Today, we end this war," Jake announced to his fleet commanders. "Not by conquering the Kethver, but by destroying their ability to conquer anyone else." Operation Prometheus was humanity's final gambit. While Kethver forces were scattered across the galaxy fighting rebellions on dozens of worlds, the human fleet would strike directly at the Empire's heart. Their goal was not to capture the Kethver homeworld, but to broadcast a signal that would reach every enslaved species in the galaxy. Dr. Allen Foster had spent the last year developing what he called the Liberation Protocol. It was more than just technical specifications for weapons. It was a complete guide to resistance, containing everything humanity had learned about fighting superior forces and winning through determination and clever tactics. "The signal will reach every world in the galaxy," Allen explained to the fleet commanders. "Every species under Kethver rule will receive detailed instructions on how to build weapons, organize resistance cells, and coordinate uprisings. Importantly, they'll see us attacking the Empire's homeworld and know that victory is possible." Captain Susan Blake commanded the lead squadron aboard the Retribution. Her ship had been upgraded again, now carrying the most advanced weapons humanity could build. But she knew the real battle would not be won by superior firepower. "Remember," she told her crew, "we're not trying to destroy the Kethver civilization. We're trying to destroy their empire. There's a difference." The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, beginning the long journey to the Kethver home system. Behind them, resistance movements across the galaxy prepared for the largest coordinated uprising in galactic history. War Commander Dexmal stood in the great war room of the Kethver High Command, facing the Empire's most powerful leaders. The Supreme Commander, an ancient Kethvar who had ruled for over 1,000 years, studied the reports from across the galaxy with growing anger. "Explain to me," the Supreme Commander said in a voice like grinding metal, "how a single primitive species has managed to inspire rebellions on 147 worlds." Dexmal had been dreading this moment for months. "Supreme Commander, the humans are unlike any species we have encountered. They do not accept defeat. When we destroy their cities, they build new ones. When we kill their leaders, new ones emerge. When we defeat their armies, they become guerrilla fighters." The Supreme Commander's black eyes focused on Dexmal with deadly intensity. "You are telling me that the greatest empire in galactic history cannot defeat a species that was using chemical rockets 3 years ago? The humans have learned to use our own technology against us," Dexmal replied. "They study our weaknesses, adapt to our tactics, and share everything they learn with other rebel species. They have turned resistance into a science. Before the T, Supreme Commander could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. A massive human fleet had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kethver home system. President Maria Rodriguez sat in the command center of the U.S. Constitution, watching the Kethver homeworld grow larger on the main screen. This was the planet that had spawned an empire of slavery and conquest. Today, it would witness the end of that empire. "Madam President," reported Captain Ben Cooper, now serving as her military aide, "all ships are in position. The broadcast equipment is ready to transmit on all frequencies." Maria nodded. The Liberation Protocol was ready to be sent to every corner of the galaxy. Once it was transmitted, every enslaved species would have the knowledge they needed to fight for their freedom. "Begin the attack," she ordered. The human fleet struck the Kethver home defenses with precision and fury. Ships that had been built to exploit every weakness in alien technology tore through the Empire's most powerful fleet like it was made of paper. But the real battle was happening on the airwaves. As human ships fought Kethver defenders, Dr. Foster's signal was being broadcast to every world in the galaxy. On Zarian Prime, the rebels who had been fighting with improvised weapons for months suddenly received detailed plans for building starships. On Tellus 4, enslaved workers learned how to turn mining equipment into weapons of war. On 100 other worlds, species that had given up hope suddenly discovered that freedom was within their grasp. Supreme Commander Veltar watched his home fleet die on the tactical displays with something approaching panic. The humans weren't just winning the battle, they were making it look easy. Ships that had never been defeated were exploding like fireworks against the night sky. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. "Over half the home fleet, Supreme Commander. The human weapons are cutting through our defenses like they were designed specifically to counter our technology." "Because they were," Bexmal said quietly. "The humans have been studying us for 3 years. They know our ships better than we do." As if to prove his point, a group of human fighters swarmed the command ship's escorts, destroying them with weapons that seemed to ignore Kethver shields entirely. Captain Lisa Hayes led the assault on the main communication array that controlled the Empire's information network. Her mission was to ensure that the Liberation Protocol reached every world in Kethver space. "Target the central transmitter," she ordered her gunners. "We need to take control of their entire communications network." The battle for the communication station was fierce, but brief. The Kethver defenders fought bravely, but they were facing humans who had been preparing for this moment for 3 years. When the station fell, Lisa connected Dr. Foster's broadcast equipment directly to the Empire's own communication network. The Liberation Protocol began transmitting with the power of the entire Kethver system behind it, across the galaxy. Enslaved species received a message they had never expected to hear. "People of the galaxy, this is President Maria Rodriguez of the United Earth Government. 3 years ago, the Kethver Empire demanded our surrender. We refused. Today, we stand in their home system, broadcasting proof that no empire is invincible." The message continued with detailed instructions for building weapons, organizing resistance, and coordinating uprisings. But more than the technical information, it carried something the galaxy had not heard in centuries: the voice of defiance. "The Empire told you that resistance was futile," Maria's voice continued. "They lied. Resistance is not only possible, it is inevitable. Every species has the right to be free, and today we give you the tools to claim that freedom." As the message spread across the galaxy, something remarkable happened. On world after world, species that had been enslaved for generations rose up in coordinated rebellion. The Empire's communication network, designed to maintain control, became the instrument of its own destruction. War Commander Vex Mol watched the tactical displays as reports poured in from across the galaxy. Rebellions were erupting faster than the Empire could respond to them. Entire sectors were falling out of Kethfer control within hours. "Supreme Commander," he reported, "we're losing contact with our outer territories. The rebellions are spreading faster than we can contain them." Supreme Commander Veltar stared at the displays, showing the collapse of his empire in real time. 1,000 years of conquest were unraveling in a single day. "Recall all fleets," he ordered. "Abandon the frontier worlds. We need every ship to defend the core systems." But Thexmal knew it was too late. The humans had done something no enemy had ever done before. They had not just defeated the Empire militarily, they had destroyed the very idea of Empire itself. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the last Kethfer resistance crumble around their homeworld. The alien fleet was retreating to the planet's surface, their formation broken and their morale shattered. "Admiral," reported Captain Amy Parker, "we're receiving surrender requests from Kethfer commanders across the system. They want to negotiate terms." Jake considered the request for a moment. The Empire's military force was broken, but that had never been the real goal. "Tell them we'll accept their surrender on one condition," he said. "They release every slave, abandon every occupied world, and dissolve the Empire permanently. Any Kethver who wants to live in peace with their neighbors is welcome to do so. But the age of conquest is over." A final transmission came from Supreme Commander Veltar himself. The ancient ruler of the galaxy's most powerful empire spoke in a voice filled with defeat and confusion. "Human leaders, we surrender unconditionally. The Empire will be dissolved. All enslaved species will be released. We do not understand how you accomplish this, but we accept that our time is over." President Rodriguez appeared on screens across the galaxy for the final broadcast of the war. "People of the galaxy, the Kethver Empire is no more. Not because we destroyed it with superior weapons, but because we destroyed the idea that some beings have the right to rule over others." She paused, looking directly into the camera. 3 years ago, the Empire wanted our obedience. We gave them something they never expected, the knowledge that freedom cannot be conquered, only surrendered.